Hi, I'm Shana Meyerson with the Yoga of War podcast, here today with investigative journalist Erin Bandler. If you appreciate and find value in these important discussions, please consider supporting the show so I can continue to bring you such amazing and esteemed guests. Details are pinned in the comments below, and I'm a little concerned that, oh, there we are. Okay, I wasn't sure if it was streaming. So just for anybody who cares, YouTube changed the interface recently, and it used to take up the whole thing, but now it's just a little thing. So we are live again, as previously mentioned, with Erin Bandler. So guys, listen. If you're looking for quick encyclopedic knowledge on a topic, any topic, chances are that you go to Wikipedia as your first source of information. It's okay. You're not alone. In fact, the vast majority of students and the general public are with you on that. No one uses the old-fashioned printed volumes of Encyclopedia Brittanica anymore like we did before the internet. Are you old enough to have used Encyclopedia Brittanica?
Yeah. I have to really think back a ways, but
Okay. I also knew the Dewey Decimal System, and we used to look things up with cards. So that's how old I am.
Gotcha.
Okay. Just to be clear. So that being said, Encyclopedia Brittanica, or the old-fashioned kinds of encyclopedias, they were written and curated by bona fide scholars. And, well, they were based on facts. What people don't seem to realize when they use Wikipedia as their reference point is that it's a crowdsourced medium written and edited by everyday people and replete with subjective biases and even untruths, which is a really nice way of saying lies and propaganda. But I digress. Today, Erin Bandler and I will discuss the rampant anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, and downright anti-Semitic bias that dominates Wikipedia's platform. Erin Bandler is an award-winning national reporter at JNS, the Jewish News Syndicate, and he is based here in Los Angeles. Originally from the San Francisco Bay Area, he worked for nearly 8 years at the Jewish Journal. Do you know that David Suisse has been on this show?
I'm not surprised.
Everyone's been on the show.
Tell David I say hi.
Okay, tell him now.
Hi, David.
Okay, just in case he's watching. And before that, he was at the Daily Wire. Thanks for joining me, Erin. I have to say that preparing for this show sent me down such a rabbit hole.
Wikipedia does that to people.
Just call me Alice. I gotta be honest. This has been a crazy ride. So I think to start this conversation, it would help for you to explain to people what Wikipedia is. So beyond what people believe it is, which is an objective, scholarly, authoritative, legitimate source of encyclopedic knowledge,
right.
What is Wikipedia really?
So firstly, thank you for having me on. I'm very excited for this. Wikipedia, I think a lot of people think of Wikipedia as just this platform where anyone can edit, and so it needs to be viewed skeptically. And yet, everyone uses it for information anyway, because it's so convenient. It's always the first thing that pops up on a Google search, which is not a coincidence, by the way. We can get more into the relationship between Google and Wikipedia.
Yes.
But it's more than just a platform that anyone can edit. It's a very bureaucratic platform with all this panoply of rules and policies. And if you don't know them, if you want to be an editor and you don't know the policies, it's very easy to get sanctioned off the platform. And editors can get banned all the time on Wikipedia. And so what happens is that ideological activists, particularly on the anti-Israel side, take the time to learn the various policies, the guidelines that govern Wikipedia, and they use them to they use them and weaponize them to try and distort their narrative as the truth, as neutrality on Wikipedia, and that. And unfortunately, the pro-Israel side is not as nearly as good at playing the game as Wikipedia. That's what it is. It's a game. You know, it is a game based on all this various bureaucratic rules and so forth. And if you know how to do it, then it's a lot easier for you to get your narrative ensconced as the neutral side on Wikipedia.
Okay, we're jumping ahead of ourselves a little,
Yeah.
Aaron, because you're talking to me. I know what Wikipedia is,
Yeah.
but I have to be honest that I think, for example, my mom, who just said hi,
Hi, Shana's mom.
would probably assume that Wikipedia by the name means wiki, whatever that means. I mean, it means encyclopedia. So I think that the average person on the street would just think Wikipedia is an online encyclopedia.
Right.
Simple as that. Okay, so let's take a step back and talk to the 3-year-olds in the room. What is Wikipedia as opposed to, say, Encyclopedia Brittanica that old people like me grew up with?
Right.
So what does crowdsource mean? Not everybody even
right.
knows.
So crowdsource, what that means is that any random person, provided that they learn and follow Wikipedia's policies, of course, is that they then are essentially they're peer reviewing each other. It's just different random people checking each other's work and trying to add to various articles that they can to try and make it better. And so the idea, in theory, is that all these people are working together, that eventually Wikipedia will be the sum of all human knowledge. That's what Wikipedia builds itself as the sum of all human knowledge. So the idea is that if you have all these people all working together and anyone can add anything into an article, then by nature it's going to come across as balanced, as factual, and thorough. But as I said, in reality, it doesn't really work that way. And so the difference is that then you have random people sort of fighting over what the article should or should not say, as opposed to scholars, academic credentialed scholars, arguing about like what an encyclopedia should or should not say. And so when you have a model where basically anyone can become an editor, again, provided that the caveat that they can follow Wikipedia's policies and so forth, that makes it vulnerable to people within the various agenda.
Okay, so for those who are following what Aaron's saying, I really want to zero in on this last word that he said, which was agenda, because an objective resource such as a standard encyclopedia has no agenda. Okay, so in fact, if you look at the actual sort of guidelines for the wiki writers, it is supposed to be, in theory, though it's long since been abandoned, a neutral platform. I want to read a quote by Larry Sanger. Now, you know who Larry Sanger is, of course. For those of you who don't know, he's one of the actual co-founders, okay, of Wikipedia. And notably, he is the most vocal critic of the platform, perhaps on Earth today, because he feels sort of responsible for the dumpster fire that it's become. So I want to read a quote from him. He goes so far as to call Wikipedia, quote unquote, the most comprehensive propaganda propaganda op, meaning operation, in human history. Ouch. Meanwhile, Wikipedia gets 7 billion unique visitors a month. Considering that there are about 8 billion people on Earth, that's almost 90% of the world population on Wikipedia every month for approximately 15 billion page views monthly. Okay, these are mind-boggling numbers. I know numbers like 7 and 15 sound like manageable numbers, but once you put the word billion at the end of it, this is a much bigger, I'm going to say problem, but you could call it a platform, than our minds can even wrap around. So I'm wondering though, Erin, does Wikipedia have any like legal responsibility to
No.
either?
No.
End of story.
In the past, there have been debates over Section 230 of the
Yes.
Communications Decency Act as it pertains to like publisher versus platform in regards to like Facebook, Twitter versus now X, and so forth. But what was absent from those discussions was Wikipedia and how that applies to Wikipedia. Because right now, under Section 230, the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the nonprofit that oversees Wikipedia, they have complete legal immunity from from any sort of Wikipedia article content. Now, people can sue individual editors, but how can you know who to sue if they're anonymous?
Right. And what I have found is that so there's 250,000 editors. And there are 62 power editors. Okay, like the 62 most powerful editors, 85% of them are anonymous.
Sounds about. I think with powerful, they're like the most like the editors can edit the most on Wikipedia.
Not just edit the most, but also have the ability to decide what does and does not stay on the platform. So they have like higher editorial, I guess, responsibilities. This is from what I understood from listening to Larry Sanger, but okay, whatever it is, he called them the 62 most powerful editors. I don't think it's simply a matter of who's making the most edits, but how much like veto power they have, for example, over other people's edits.
Well, usually you don't see editors with that kind of veto power. I have to look at the exact comment that I think I was referring to. So, what I would say is that there are regular editors. There are also administrators or admins, and their admin power. They, when it comes to contentious topics like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, admins have the power to unilaterally sanction other editors as long as they're not involved in the topic area. And usually they don't do that on their own unless it's like a truly egregious violation going on. And so what happens is that editors get reported to like these different venues. I think of them as like lower courts, where they get reported and the admins kind of deliberate amongst themselves and they'll decide on if the sanctions warranted or not. Wikipedia also has its own Supreme Court known as the Arbitration Committee or ARBCOM. It's a 15-member panel and they're all elected by the Wikipedia community. And they sort of like, they will take up cases that usually involve like a bunch of broad, like topic-wide disruption, for lack of a better word, or sometimes involving admins. And so, but like, again, like they all handle behavioral conduct. They don't handle editorial conduct per se. Usually when there are editorial disputes, what happens is that there is, okay, so I guess so here's how Wikipedia works. All right, let's get started into that. Wikipedia operates by a process called consensus. Now, what that means is that if you go make a change to the Wikipedia page right now, and no one disputes it, it's presumed to have consensus. However, if someone does dispute it, then what happens is that you're supposed to work out your differences on what's known as a talk page of Wikipedia article. Every Wikipedia article has a talk page. Look at any Wikipedia page right now. If at the very top, there's a tab that says talk. Click it, and you will look at all the discussions over the years that have taken place at that article, and you will see what editors have argued about over what the article should or should not say. Now, how consensus is supposed to work in theory is that editors work out the differences, they reach a compromise, and everyone sings kumbaya afterwards. Right. But this is the internet. And when it comes to contentious topics, like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there's a lot of fighting and so forth, and there's less agreement. And so what happens then when you have like you have really contentious discussions and there's a stalemate, there will be these formal discussions that take place. And in these formal discussions, what happens is that editors will put in their stated position on what the article should or should not say. And they will put in their stated rationale as to why. And when they put their arguments in, it's supposed to be arguments as they pertain to Wikipedia policy. So a good example of this actually is there's a Wikipedia article called Gaza Genocide. And when the discussion was had on whether or not it should be titled Gaza Genocide, any arguments that said, well, Israel's not committing genocide in Gaza, we put false information in there, that does not work. under Wikipedia policy. You have to argue from the policy perspective as to why Gaza genocide goes against Wikipedia's neutral point of view policies. And so what happens is that at the end of such discussions, an uninvolved editor known as a closer will render a verdict on the discussion based on the numbers as well as the strength of the arguments presented in these discussions. And so numerically speaking, consensus is usually seen as about 2/3 at least, but the strength of the arguments factor makes it a bit subjective. And so, so Wikipedia, to distill it down to the TLDR, Wikipedia is a numbers game. And in 2024, which is when Wikipedia's anti-Israel bias went off the rails, there were discussions as high as like 3-1 in favor of the anti-Israel side. 3-1. Those were numbers in favor of downgrading the ADL to making them generally unreliable on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That was a 3-1 discussion. There was also a discussion that ended up in a near total ban on using the Hamas wrong qualifier when describing the Gaza Health Ministry's numbers. So you look at Wikipedia right now, you'll see, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, X amount of Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. You will not find Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry just about anywhere on Wikipedia because of that discussion. Yeah. And that was 3-1 in favor of that near total ban on the Hamas-run qualifier. Now, at the beginning of last year, a bunch of prominent anti-Israel editors got banned from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict topic area. 6 of what many would say
anti-Israel?
Yeah.
Okay.
As well as 2 pro-Israel editors.
Okay.
So 8 of them got banned from editing Israel-Palestine-related articles. But even despite those sanctions, like there's still anti-Israel bias despite that. And for example, in September there was a discussion for the opening sentence of the Gaza genocide Wikipedia page say in a neutral voice that Israel's committing genocide in Gaza, and that one was 2-1. That was a 2-1 discussion in favor of that sentence being used. So clearly, the numbers are still in favor of the anti-Israel editors on Wikipedia, and that's why Wikipedia has become so biased against Israel.
Okay, we're going to talk about very, very specifics a little later. I still want to delve into just wiki bias in general because it's really a story on its own, and it's amazing to hear you talking about this ecosphere because it really is. First of all, when we're talking about 7 billion out of 8 billion people on Earth participating, we are talking about basically an alternate universe.
It is an alternate universe. It's a world unto itself. This is why I've become so passionate about the subject, because Wikipedia really is its own. It's its own world. It's its own universe. It's its own sort of system of governance. It's so fascinating, which is really what's made me sort of fall in love with this subject, because of how fascinating it is. I spent years of my life researching and covering this subject, which makes its descent into a propaganda arm even all the more tragic.
Yeah, it is amazing. So what I found about, you were talking about all the cooks in the kitchen and how they find consensus, and it really is remarkable. Boy, there's so many things I want to touch on because you touch on so many things.
Yeah.
Section 230, the thing that, so for those people who don't know what Section 230 is, because again, we need to talk to people who have like zero.
Right.
So Section 230 was basically the law that regulated, let's say, social media content or anything where it's not the platform itself that is creating the content that protected the platform from being liable for the content posted by contributors. Okay. Now, I mean, since then, we've seen a lot of efforts to sort of regulate, particularly Facebook, X, Instagram, the biggest platforms. But these always run into, let's say, free speech walls. But one thing I do want to say, just going back to 230, is that if 85%, and this is Sanger's like actual statistics, so I have to sort of take these to the bank. If 85% of the top editors are anonymous and they are indemnified, but so is the platform, that means, like you said, there are zero guardrails on this. And something else that I want to mention, because This isn't just about consensus, okay? It's also about echo chamber. If you heard what Aaron was saying about people being literally kicked off the platform for certain things, Wikipedia today is an absolutely non-neutral platform that doesn't even claim to be neutral anymore. They call their, the acronym that they use as opposed to like a WASP is a GOSP. Have you heard this? So it's globalist, academic, secular, and progressive. And this is the official avatar of a wiki editor or a wiki writer. This is what they want. They want these GOSPs. And that's why when you say, like, they decided that the words Gaza, genocide were neutral, wherein anybody who knows anything about the war in Gaza from at least the Israeli fact-based perspective knows that there's zero evidence, according to international law, that this is by any stretch of the imagination a genocide. But Wikipedia has decided that that is the neutral term for what has gone on, is going on in Gaza. So we have to understand the depths of, again, coming back to his word, the agenda. So to me, because the other thing that people might not realize is that Wikipedia is a nonprofit organization.
Yeah, the Wikimedia Foundation, the San Francisco-based nonprofit that oversees Wikipedia.
Who are some of their major donors?
That's a great question. Well, George Soros has donated to Wikimedia Foundation.
What?
Yeah, right. $2 million in 2018. Look it up. I know that other big Google also has donated a lot of money to the Wikimedia Foundation. There's actually a whole article. It was called Google Wikipedia. I think now it's like a relationship between Google and Wikipedia or something to that effect, that talks about how Google and Wikipedia have been partnering for years. And like you see Wikipedia pop up on a Google search like almost every time as the first result. That's not a coincidence. They work together, or I say like they collaborate with each other. There are tech companies, from what I remember, that have donated to the Wikimedia Foundation too, like Apple and Amazon. I don't know the recent. I mean, I think about like some past filings from like years ago. I don't know about some of the more recent ones. So, but those are some of the examples. I think more work should be done to look into some of the donors behind the Wikimedia Foundation. But they're all the Wikimedia Foundation makes all of their. All that stuff is public information. You can find the Wikimedia Foundation's website.
Yeah. If you go to the Wikimedia website, it actually does list the major donors.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see that George Soros was not in the top tier, at least not in 2025. And I have to say, so it would be ridiculous for me to say that, say, the editors of Wikipedia have biases, but I don't. Right? Because that was my immediate conclusion. Of course, this is a Soros thing. And yes, he has been a major donor, but in the most recent list of major donors, he's not in that top tier.
Right.
So for what that's worth. Anyway, it does seem that Wikipedia is yet another NGO that has been hijacked by the anti-Western, anti-Israel, intersectional left. And there's no irony lost on the fact that they have designated, as Aaron mentioned, the ADL and NGO Monitor.
Yep.
If you guys, Gerald Steinberg was actually on my show.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, when I was in Jerusalem,
Nice.
Just a couple weeks ago, he was on my show, and you should listen to that to understand what NGO Monitor has recently uncovered. Spoiler alert. Hamas is deeply embedded in every single humanitarian organization that's operating in Gaza. And so Wikipedia has decided that they are not an acceptable source of information when it comes to anything having to do with Israel. So ADL, NGO Monitor, and quite honestly, every single conservative media, with the exception of Wall Street Journal and National Review, have been essentially blacklisted. But you know who's greenlisted? Al Jazeera. Okay. What does greenlisted mean?
It means generally reliable. So understand how Wikipedia designates its sources. It's into four. Well, I guess technically five, but four categories. There's generally reliable, which means that the source can be used just about any time. Like it's like if that's like CNN, Washington Post, any sort of mainstream media source are considered generally reliable, but so are, as Shana mentioned, Al Jazeera, MSNBC, The Nation, Mother Jones. Some of these far left news sources are considered generally reliable. And with that designation, you can use them just about any time. Then there's yellow, which is generally reliable is green. That's what green listed means. If a source has the...
Can I just interrupt really quickly? That there are actually green, like ultra reliable sources that don't even have to be cited when used for information, that they are literally accepted across the board as being so verifiable that you don't even have to cite a reference.
Interesting. And then there's yellow, which is marginally reliable. And so what that means is that, it could be used depending on the context. And usually for sources like that, it comes down to numbers. It just depends on which numbers side with with using that particular source in a certain situation. So some of the examples, so Jacobin, actually, that used to be a generally reliable source that got downgraded to marginally reliable last year. Euromed Monitor, that's a very anti-Israel source that is in the yellow category. So is Mondoweiss, which is an anti-Israel news site. National Review is under that category. Salon, Huffington Post for politics, I think, is also under that category. So then you have generally unreliable, which means that it's generally not kosher to use, and so that's where you have that's where you have Fox News for politics, for instance, falls under that category. Washington Free Beacon was in that category, but now that recently got upgraded to generally reliable. New York Post is considered generally unreliable. NGO Monitor is in that category. ADL for Israel, for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, is in that category. Actually, if you read the ADL's designation on Wikipedia right now, it's basically it's good to use outside of anything related to Israel and Zionism. That's its designation on Wikipedia. So to be precise, and
which is their primary raison d'etre.
Yeah.
So let's just cut them out of that, but they could talk about how a clock works.
Yeah, right. And then below generally unreliable is called deprecated, which is a general prohibition. And so that's like the Daily Mail is deprecated, the Daily Caller deprecated, Newsmax, Epoch Times. Those are among the sources that are deprecated. And it's the difference between generally unreliable and deprecated. An editor explained it to me as if you were to take climate change, for instance, a generally unreliable source would quote a climate skeptic. A deprecated source would presumably fabricate the quote altogether. And if you try and put a deprecated source into an article before you hit publish, there'll be a little pop-up saying hey, this source is deprecated, you can't use it. So basically, it's just deprecated is just a stronger way of saying you can't use the source. And then you have blacklisted, which means that that the site's URL can't even is blocked from Wikipedia altogether. So Breitbart is blacklisted. The Heritage Foundation is also blacklisted, which happened because in February of last year, the Forward had this big story about how the Heritage Foundation was planning on unmasking all of these anti-Semitic editors on Wikipedia. And Wikipedia editors, they take anonymity very seriously. And so when that report came out, they were like, this is dangerous for Wikipedia editors. For the safety of our editors, we need to blacklist the Heritage Foundation and bar it from the site altogether. So like no URLs to the Heritage Foundation on Wikipedia. And of course, lately Heritage, of course, has had its own sort of set of issues with anti-Semitism. That's a whole other story. But for the person Wikipedia, like that's why Heritage got blacklisted, was because of this report from the Forward that that's stating that Heritage was allegedly trying to unmask a bunch of anti-Semitic editors. Did they what?
Did they unmask the anti-Semitic editors?
Well, if they have, I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
I don't have any. I don't know like what's the inside baseball at Heritage.
I think that what amazes me about this blacklisting process is that it has nothing to do with the veracity of the fact, but of their own judgment of the source, which is to say that, again, going back to like the ADL can talk about, how a clock works because, but on that same metaphor, a clock is right twice a day.
Yeah, a broken clock is right twice a day. Yeah.
I can guarantee that every source, even sources that I don't like, sometimes happen to dig up a fact that no one else has dug up that they can verify. And to say that if you cite Newsmax, that from what I understand, it's not just that it's blacklisted, but you can potentially be kicked off as an editor if you try to use these sources. And if you're only limited, so going back to the Israel, if you're talking about articles that are related to Israel and you could only use anti-Israel sources, I mean, that's problematic.
Yeah, and to pick up like the job of Wikipedia editor, if you really distill it to its basic, distill to the basics, the Wikipedia editors, all they can do is summarize what reliable sources say. That's it. But of course, when the reliable sources that they can use all kind of skew to the left, then that alone creates bias in the Wikipedia article. And by like going back to what's generally reliable and so forth, Amnesty International is considered generally reliable. Amnesty International, which anyone in this space knows, that Amnesty International has bias against Israel. The Southern Poverty Law Center is considered generally reliable, and they have been accused of bias against conservatives and so forth. And so again, like those are like double standards that come into play when we talk about the ADL, being considered generally unreliable for Israel-related topics. But Amnesty is kosher, SPLC is kosher, and so. That alone creates bias in the Wikipedia article. And yeah, like if you consistently try to argue in favor of using sources that are considered unreliable, or even if you denigrate sources that are considered reliable, then those are things that can get you sanctioned. I've seen examples of that. And so, yeah.
So how does Wikipedia justify these designations and still claim to be neutral?
So this again gets down to the policies and how Wikipedia is all a numbers game. So as I said earlier, all these discussions on Wikipedia tend to center around like Wikipedia policy. And so and when it comes to reliable sources, it's no different. And so what will usually happen when it comes to debating if a source is reliable is that they will argue if a source consistently spreads misinformation, if they don't adhere to journalistic principles, and so forth. And one of the ways they do this is that they use a standard called UBO, which stands for use by others. And so what that means is how other reliable sources view a source. That goes into how Wikipedia should view it. And so if the New York Times is citing a source, then that is considered a point in that source's favor. However, if the New York Times, CNN, Washington Post are arguing that a source consistently spreads this information, then that's a point against it in Wikipedia. And so when it comes to sources, like Fox News and so forth, like their more conservative sources tend to be under a microscope more. And actually the Daily Wire, the Daily Wire, like one of my former employers, they're also considered generally unreliable on Wikipedia. But a lot of mainstream media sources, they will put conservative sources like Fox and so forth under a microscope, and so they will look for any reason to claim that Fox is spreading this information and so forth. And so New York Times runs an article saying Fox spreads spreads misinformation, Wikipedia editors say, "Oh, see, look, this like we need to downgrade Fox." And there had been a campaign to downgrade Fox on Wikipedia for years. And after the Dominion settlement happened, that's what moved the needle on Wikipedia, because a lot of, I guess you would say, the independent voters decided to downgrade Fox on Wikipedia because of that. That was back in 2023, so it's been a few years. So what will happen is that when it comes to conservative sources like Fox and so forth, that they'll say, look, they consistently spread misinformation on COVID, the 2020 election, climate change, et cetera, and they will use that as reason to downgrade those sources. However, when you look at more left-wing sources like The Nation, MSNBC, they'll just say, well, these are held in high regard by mainstream media sources. They are opinion sources. We can still cite them. And they'll also say that under Wikipedia policy, bias is not a reason to downgrade a source. And that is true. Like, if you look at Wikipedia policy, it does say that. But of course, mileage may vary depending on, where the numbers of editors are on a particular source. Now, when it comes to sources they like, they will always find reason to defend them. So like Washington Post, there have been controversy with Washington Post with the Covington kids defamation lawsuit that ended up being a settlement and so forth. And so when cases like that arise, editors be like, well, generally reliable doesn't mean always reliable. They're allowed some mistakes. It's like a good source will correct their mistakes. And when you have Al Jazeera, where there was that instance where they had a video interview with some woman who claimed that the Israeli soldiers were engaging in rapes at Al-Shifa, and then they just quietly took that video down when it turned out to be false. Editors were like, well, I mean, they never reported it was true. They reported an allegation, which of course it's like, well, just because something allegation doesn't mean you run with it, but what it just that. And if you're trying to argue that Qatar funds Al Jazeera as a reason to downgrade from Wikipedia, that argument does not work, because they'll just say yeah, well, we consider the BBC reliable. That's state funded. Should we downgrade the BBC too? Well, given the recent controversies, you can make a case for that. You could,
right, but I'm gonna. I would say that BBC is a very bad example, because last year the BBC was raked over the coals, and there were some.
I know,
and there were some very high level resignations due to their anti-Semitic bias.
Oh, for sure, right. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that's how these editors. That's what these editors will argue.
Same with NPR. So when we're talking about state-funded media in general, we're talking about the most, not the least, biased information. NPR, PBS, Al Jazeera, BBC. These are non-neutral. But I have a question, Andrew. Sorry, Aaron. I'm thinking
that happens more often than you might think.
Well,
I actually have a cousin named Andrew, and so sometimes in my family, it can cause some.
Well, my other podcasting partner is Andrew Fox.
Yeah.
So,
I follow him on Twitter.
Yeah, so I say Andrew a lot and so I'm visioning the A, and so, but you're the double A. So, Aaron, I have a question. Certainly, this isn't a question; it's actually a statement. Certainly, New York Times, for example, will often cite the ADL. I mean, it's very common. So, what happens when a greenlit source is referencing a blacklisted source?
Well, so this is an interesting question, because in the ADL discussion back in 2024, this was the main reason in favor of keeping the ADL as a generally reliable source as a whole. It was like, look, it's widely cited in mainstream news sources like New York Times. It's widely cited in academic papers. Like that, by definition, should make the ADL a generally reliable source in Wikipedia. But that discussion was overrun by anti-Israel editors. So what they did was they used sources from The Nation, from The Guardian. The Guardian's also considered generally reliable on Wikipedia. So The Nation, The Guardian, Jewish Currents, which is a fairly anti-Israel news source. They use sources like that to try and cast doubt on the ADL's credibility. And they were like, oh, look, the ADL clearly they are saying that any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. Which is not true. But enough people argued that in the discussion to result in the out to downgrade it. It was purely a numbers thing. Like when you have 3-1 in arguing in favor of downgrading the ADL, those numbers are those lopsided numbers are always going to win. It comes down to numbers in the end on Wikipedia.
I'm sorry, did you just say that you believe that the ADL says that every criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic?
No, they don't. I'm saying that that's what the editors argued, and I'm saying that's not true.
It's not only.
Yeah,
let me just go on record as saying, because I used to be a speaker for the ADL, and though I have since very much distanced myself from the ADL in the last 5 years when they've gone so ultra liberal that I think they're actually not even standing up for Jews in Israel anymore. But they do say very explicitly, very, very explicitly that as far as they're concerned, valid criticism of Israel, as long as it doesn't rely on double standards, is absolutely not anti-Semitic. So they have that in writing. It's ludicrous that people would
for sure,
that people would use that as evidence that they should not be a credible source.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, as you said, the ADL has always made very clear for years that not all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. They've been very clear about about the line between demonization of Israel versus just criticizing Israeli government policy. They are but these anti-Israel editors on Wikipedia, they just were able to drum up support for the position that the ADL does view all criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic, and that was enough to win the day on that discussion. It comes out to numbers on Wikipedia, even though, like as you said, like it is very much not true that it's very much not true that the ADL views all criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic. It's just, but when the truth is sort of left up to numbers, then the truth kind of goes by the wayside.
Yeah. So I've been looking a lot into like potential thoughts on reform, and I want to ask a few questions throughout this conversation, but I want to start with this idea that some people are saying that if Wikipedia were to incorporate what they call competing pages, where like an alternate viewpoint would get its own article, but do you think that this would solve problems, or if it would further entrench biases, and only in this instance in both directions? To me, it seems like this would create a more non-neutral platform. In the very concept of having competing pages, to me, is only acknowledging the nature of the bias that's not supposed to be on a neutral platform in the first place.
It's an interesting idea, and I think Larry Sanger has talked about this with his. I think he's talked about the encyclosphere, but just a more decentralized encyclopedia, where he's talked about like differing pages with different points of view, where it's like like one page has a point of view, another page has another, and then they're sort of rated by users. It's an interesting idea. I think it's an interesting concept as an potential alternative to Wikipedia. Whether that works in practice or so forth, I don't know. I guess now that Grokopedia is a thing, it's also Justipedia. There are alternatives to Wikipedia out there, but there also have been alternatives to Wikipedia in the past that have failed. And I think so much of that is because it's because Google. It's because Google puts Wikipedia at the top of its search results so often, and now Wikipedia is used when it comes to training for AI, chatbots like ChatGPT, et cetera. And so, until that sort of like monopoly is broken, like there's no, it's hard for any alternative to Wikipedia to really survive on its own.
Yeah, AI creates this feedback loop, where the more Wikipedia puts out information, the more AI is going to pick up on that information, put it out, and it's a feedback loop. It amplifies over and over, and to that extent, I don't know how Wikipedia can possibly be unseated as like the king of the encyclopedias, although Sanger's new concept of basically taking sort of the omnipedia and take all of the information from all the different, but it all just becomes an echo chamber. I mean, it's so funny. I did a lot of like sort of comparing Wikipedia and Grokpedia entries. And in many cases, like literally the paragraphs are exactly the same, because Grokpedia indexes the entire internet, and what is the massive, elephant in the room of the internet is Wikipedia. Right? So it just, this wheel just keeps spinning, and I'm not sure how we get off this carousel at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it comes down to that Google and Wikipedia relationship. I mean, how do you pierce that? I don't know. I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens with the House Oversight Committee's investigation into Wikipedia. That was launched in August, and one of the things we're looking into is concerns of like coordinated editing campaigns to put anti-Israel and anti-Semitic bias onto Wikipedia. And so we'll see what that investigation turns up, and if there's going to be, if members of the Wikimedia Foundation are going to be hauled before Congress, that'll be very interesting, kind of like the university presidents were. And so, it's also interesting that it seems like Wikipedia is losing editors, which is interesting. Yeah. And some of the web traffic has declined a bit too, if memory serves.
From 7 billion to 6.9 billion.
Right. I mean, like everything's relative. And so, so it kind of makes you wonder if like.
Do you mean since like Grokpedia launched in the fall? Like, I mean, are we talking about just the last few months, or what kind of trend are you looking at?
It was like it's something like it was like down 8% last year, maybe. I forget now exactly, but I mean, it's fairly recent, but it still gets obviously a high amount of views. But it makes you wonder, like it's really been in like the past year or so that Wikipedia has started to come under criticism, from in various like news reporting, such as my own, and there are others too. And maybe that's having an impact.
Yeah. I think that like the primary thing, the only way out of this is for people to stop being so lazy in their searches, because Google is going to put it, like, to me, when I look something up, I literally, because Wikipedia is always going to be the first hit, I literally just skip that first entry. I'm like, let me look for some actual facts here. And I think that the problem is that people have been programmed not to think anymore. And that's been a campaign that's hit us on from a lot of different directions. And when one of the things is that if we have computers that tell us how to get from point A to point B, that tell us how to whatever, solve problems, math problems that we're supposed to be figuring out in school, or, that do all our thinking for us, then of course we're going to get lazy. We're going to look for the low hanging fruit. There it is Wikipedia. And I think that thinking people understand that Wikipedia may be good for just a glance at a neutral topic to understand it, but that is not like the be all and end all. But the normal person, the kid who's doing research, like, he's going to be deeply affected by these articles. Like, this is dangerous stuff. This isn't just not the whole story. This is a platform that is programming the minds of our students and the general public.
That's right. And I think it's important to note that it's true that, like, in school, students cannot cite Wikipedia on the research papers, but studies have shown that students will look at Wikipedia at the beginning of the research for their coursework, and they will cite the sources that Wikipedia uses. But as we just discussed, Wikipedia only offers sources that are left to far left for the most part. So it does have an impact when it comes to students, or really just anyone just looking on a topic for anything, because it's so convenient. It's right there, and it has all these citations. And if you don't know any better, it comes across like it's that it's authoritative, that it's thorough, that it's scholarly, but it's I think if you use Wikipedia for like, looking up your favorite sports team,
Right.
Who played what on a certain Beatles album, it's probably fine. It's probably accurate. There's been studies that show that doctors and judges use Wikipedia for research on their respective work, and I'm sure for those it's probably okay. But when it comes to controversial topics, then that's where Wikipedia becomes one-sided.
I just want to say that there's a very, very simple workaround for not
Yeah.
citing, you alluded to it, but
Yeah.
for not citing Wikipedia, which is just read the Wikipedia article. And Wikipedia, one thing they're really good at is footnotes.
That's right.
So they have all the citations. So all you have to do is copy the citation at the end of the article instead of saying that it came from Wikipedia. And all of a sudden, you are relying just on Wikipedia. And by the way, you could just put that into ChatGPT to write the paper for you anyway.
Exactly. Yep.
The only benefit I would say to that is that if you're having ChatGPT write your papers, maybe you're not even reading it, learning it, and being indoctrinated by the false
yeah, right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I
Silver
guess
linings.
right there in every cloud. But I guess that like another thing that I want to point out again on this red light, green light dichotomy is just that we're seeing really the same pattern in media news reporting that we see in Wikipedia, which is to say the complete departure from fact-based reporting. Now I'm old, but I'm not that old. Like I'm not like quite like the Walter Cronkite generation, which older generations always say. Like back then, they just the facts. It was just the facts. Today in Vietnam, 57 soldiers lost their lives. It wasn't like today in Vietnam, the Viet Cong who are, communist operatives, there was no color, there was no bias. This used to be the standard. But even when I was a kid, writing papers, like you don't put adjectives in a research paper, for example. But that if the media standard has gone out the window and Wikipedia relies on media for citations to some extent, there is no way, really, it seems, for Wikipedia to be neutral when none of their sources is neutral.
Yeah, well, I guess the heart of the matter, right? And so when you see on Wikipedia, like such and such person falsely stated X, they will say like, well, it's neutral for us to use falsely because all these sources have said it's false, So whether it's something that Trump said or some conservative media figures said, like they'll say like the editors will say because these news outlets like the New York Times or whatever have said that this statement is false, we have to say it too. Of course, there's some that'll argue that even if news outlets say that it's false, they still shouldn't say just because Wikipedia policy states that articles are supposed to be written in like a neutral and dispassionate tone. You can actually tone down like language in a news article or source and so forth. But a lot of editors, they'll just jump on the idea of like, well, this person I don't like says something false according to the New York Times. So I think Wikipedia should say it too. And the numbers usually went out on that. But I think that also just goes to show how easy it is for editors to hijack an article and put in a characterization that's not neutral, but portrayed as neutral. It gets back to the Gaza genocide article. Like when it came to that opening sentence of the article saying that Israel's committing genocide in Gaza, the argument that they all used was that there's an academic consensus that Israel's committing genocide in Gaza. That is false. There is no academic consensus on that. Like it's very much a topic with a lot of differing views. And a truly neutral source would reflect all those differing points of view. But instead of Wikipedia, the editors have decided that there's academic consensus that Israel's committing genocide in Gaza. Therefore, Wikipedia should reflect that. And so, again, it comes back to numbers. It comes back to how when you have, like, when the majority of editors believe that Israel's committing genocide in Gaza, it reflects into Wikipedia article content.
Are editors in some way categorized or limited in what they can comment on or edit based on particular areas of expertise. For example, if I know everything there is to know about zebras, can I make an edit on a post about genocide in Gaza?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not required on Wikipedia to have expertise on an article subject. Now, granted, like, you know, people have different interests, you know, different hobbies, and you see oftentimes in these topic areas that like there's a certain cabal of editors who sort of like dictate, you know, a topic. And for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that's especially true. There've been, well, I think there's a popularized term nowadays that there's like this gang of 40 anti-Israel editors that dominate the articles. I cannot confirm that it's 40. What I can say that it's a lot, and that this is, in my opinion, just from all the years of research and editors I've talked to, is I think there's like a core of like 5 to 10 anti-Israel editors that have basically dominated this topic for years and years and years. And some of them were among those that were banned from editing Israel-Palestinian conflict articles at the beginning of last year. But I mean, like we're talking about like, you know, a decade plus of editing, and that's a lot of damage that can be done in that time. And so all that to say is that yes, you don't need expertise on a particular topic to edit a page, but there are cabals of editors who will dictate what certain articles in a topic should or should not say. And it's just kind of like there's no really wrong reason for it. It's just like over years they've just gained credibility on Wikipedia. They formed blocks and alliances, and because they have a reputation on Wikipedia and they know how to play the game that is Wikipedia well, they've been able to entrench themselves as like as one of these editors that dictates what the articles say. And again, like that. A lot of these, there were a significant amount of those editors got banned.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say that we're talking about like a core of 5 to 10. Some of those were among those that got topic banned from the area. But even despite that, like it still hasn't changed much.
And haven't there been moratoriums, editorial moratoriums?
That's right. Yes.
Okay, so why don't
so a moratorium? What that means is that, again, moratoriums happen when it comes to like these formal discussions that are based on like numbers and the arguments and so forth. And what will happen is that there will come to a consensus will be reached of a moratorium put in for a specific amount of time, whether that's like 12 months, you know, a year, 2 months. You know, it's all very arbitrary. It's a very rare thing on Wikipedia. Like it hasn't been like I did an article on this in December. And it's you know, in all the years of Wikipedia has been around for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many amounts of articles, countless amounts of articles on Wikipedia, and it's only been used maybe something like 40 times, maybe. Like
how many of them were about Israel?
Yeah, it's well, so what's interesting is that last year there was maybe like 5 or 6 into the moratorium was used, and like 2 of them involved Israel. The first one was on the Zionism Wikipedia page. And that page, in the opening paragraph, the second sentence, it says Zionists wanted as much land, as many Jews, and as few Palestinian Arabs as possible. Now that, I mean, like...
It's patently false.
It is. It is. And if you look at my article in the Jewish Journal from last year about it, actually, it's September 2024, so it's more than a year ago. But like I quote Asaf Romorowski, you know, a great historian, this has talked about how the early Zionists, you know, there are correspondences that showed that they sought peace, that they sought coexistence, you know, with the Arabs in the land, and that there are also instances of Jews purchasing land, you know, in early, you know, mandate Palestine or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it is false. I mean, there are certainly historians who believe that. But on a truly neutral site, it would say such historians believe this, others believe something else. Mm-hmm. But that's not what happened on Wikipedia. But anyway, there was so much discussion over that line, and for good reason. There'd be a lot of discussion about that line because of how inflammatory it is. Wikipedia editors decided to put a 12-month moratorium on that sentence, which means that no one can discuss it at all for a year. That was in February of last year, so it's almost that moratorium is almost up. But the thing is that like if you can't discuss it, like that sentence was basically solidified through one of these formal discussions prior to the moratorium. So in order to change it, you need to have another discussion, and if you can't discuss it, then that means you can't change it. And so there's a moratorium on that. In December, there was a moratorium that was so this moratorium was placed on the title of the article "New Sderot Rescue and Massacre," referencing the New Sderot Rescue Operation, the hostage rescue operation in New Sderot in Gaza in 2024. That during operation where Israeli soldiers rescued 4 hostages. On Wikipedia, they call that a massacre in the title. And that article, there was, of course, a lot of discussion about that title, even after the change, which is, through a formal discussion and close. Mm-hmm. And because there were, a handful of discussions since then, editors were like, look, this is being discussed too many times. We need a moratorium to cool things down. And so in December, they put a moratorium on that title until August of this year. And it's January. So it's going to be another 8 months, until someone could discuss it again. And so Wikipedia, one of Wikipedia's core policies about consensus is that consensus can change. Mm-hmm. And so the idea there is that something should not really be set in stone because the sources can change, for instance. And moratoriums are supposed to be used selectively with caution because of this principle. And yet here it is, where a third of the time it was used last year, it was to keep anti-Israel propaganda in place on Wikipedia articles. And again, it goes to show just how far gone Wikipedia has become.
Yeah, it's interesting because they actually, Wikipedia has a policy against what they call false balance.
That's right.
Which basically it means, for example, to give a Holocaust denier the same platform as the facts about Holocaust.
That's right.
And I do have to say that, when you look at the Holocaust denial page, for example, it's under the umbrella of anti-Semitism. And I do believe that I didn't read it super, super carefully, but on skimming it, it seemed very fair. It seemed to say, this is false, this is false, this is false, this is false, this is false. So I would say that there are exceptions to this rule. I found that to be a big one, but in this effort to not make these false equivalencies, but at the same time to literally be like, we're going to go with this falsehood, and then we're going to lock it down. And by the way, nothing's going to be resolved in a year. It's going to turn into the same just sort of snap back. But the fact that this hostage rescue mission is being called a massacre, even if within the text it were to say something like there is a claim that X number of Palestinians lost their lives in such and such operation because of this thing that happened based on facts, the word massacre is so heavily loaded, and it also implies intent. The intention of the hostage rescue was to rescue hostages.
That's right.
And by people need to be a lot more astute, because what Wikipedia does is they sneak in these words that appear neutral. Oh, of course it's a massacre. Non-thinking people don't think twice about the title. They just skim past them. In the back of their mind, they're putting it away and going, "Oh, it was a massacre."
Yeah, and we look at the discussion that resulted in the change from New Sderot Rescue Operation to New Sderot Rescue and Massacre. They justified it by citing anti-Israel sources largely. Like they cited like Francesca Albanese, for instance. Yeah, right. Oxfam, which if I'm not mistaken, that was the whole like SodaStream BDS controversy from several years ago. They cited sources like that, and they said sources like that deserve precedent over, like, say, mainstream media sources that did not call it and do not call it a massacre. And Wikipedia should not work that way, you know? I mean, like, in no world, if you follow Wikipedia policy, should, like, Francesca Albanese be considered, you know, an expert on this and have more authority over the New York Times and so forth, you know? But as I've said many times, Wikipedia is a numbers game. And so when the numbers are in favor of calling it a massacre on Wikipedia, then it gets reflected in Wikipedia article content. Numbers rule the day on Wikipedia.
Sure. And the problem with Francesca Albanese is that this halo effect, that because she's a special rapporteur, for those of you who don't know, for the United Nations, and also happens to be literally one of the most vile anti-Semites on earth today. And the lies that she spews, they are so ridiculous. But because she has the United Nations badge on her chest, of course, she's a reliable source, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
anything the UN says is considered like reliable on Wikipedia. Like anytime there's like a new UN report or like a ruling from the ICJ, where Wikipedia editors treat it as if it's like Moses descending from Mount Sinai, carrying the 10 Commandments. Like, oh my God, we got to add this to an article. This is so important. Right. You know, but of course, as we know, the UN, you know, is obviously very biased against Israel. And again, that gets reflected in Wikipedia articles when you see them directly cite like UN reports directly. And so actually, there's an article that's called Israeli apartheid. It used to be for many years called Israeli apartheid analogy, or Israel and apartheid. It got changed to Israeli apartheid in 2024, and one of the impetus for that was a ruling. It's really more like a non-binding advisory opinion, you know, saying that settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem are illegal, or something to that effect. And editors seized upon that ruling, or really the non-binding opinion, and said, see, like now the sources show that the sources all say there's a consensus among sources that Israel is an apartheid state, so we should reflect that on Wikipedia. And in that discussion, like it was basically all like just about all anti-Israel editors. That discussion, it did not attract many users, not many people. It was a very small discussion, and yet it had such massive ramifications because now it says that Israel is an apartheid state, a neutral voice in the title and in the lead. Right. And of course, anyone in this space knows that that referring to Israel as an apartheid state, that's been a blood libel, really, for lack of a better word, to demonize Israel for years. Yeah. And now now on Wikipedia, that's considered neutral, just as Gaza genocide is. That's where we are right now with Wikipedia.
Yeah, it's amazing because all you have to do is go to Israel, and the second you get off the plane in Ben Gurion, you're like, okay, never mind on the apartheid thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's, again, these patently false lies. And from what I understand, Aaron, I'm going to keep calling you Andrew because of Andrew Fox. It's just... Okay. Because you start with an A. I've never done this before, but now I'm going to keep calling you that, by the way, just FYI. But you could call me Alice for going down the rabbit hole.
There are people that refer to me as Andrew or like Adam mistakenly. It happens.
I know your name is Aaron. I promise. I just like...
I believe you.
When I podcast, I got some Andrew on the mind. Especially because we just shot yesterday. But okay, I'm making excuses. I know your name is Aaron. Okay. But so here's my question though. If we have like a bona fide Israel scholar, okay, he's got the degrees, he's got the pedigree, he's got all the things. From what I understand, if you have like a heated topic, Israel anything, probably Jewish anything, that these edits, if somebody goes in and makes a change, are literally coming down within seconds or minutes. That people are constantly monitoring these
Oh,
hot
it's so
topics.
true. Yeah.
So if you are a bona fide scholar, you, Aaron Bandler, you go on, you have, all these articles, they're all verifiable under your belt. You cite a reference that is impeccable. It's taken down in a second. So how do you or any other actual scholar make a difference on Wikipedia?
So to understand like how editors are able to monitor articles and take and revert edits, and that's what it's called. It's called a revert, and they revert edits so quickly is because you can put an article on what's known as a watch list, and if you put an article on your watch list, then you can see every time someone makes a change. In the editing history, every article has a view history section, and if you put that article on your watch list, you will see the edits come in real time. It's also true for like talk pages. You will see, every talk page comment come in real time. That's how editors are able to monitor these things. It gets sent to like your email, and then they go, oh, well, someone made a change I didn't like. I gotta go change it now.
Right.
Now, what's interesting in Wikipedia is that with some of these more contentious topics, like Israeli-Palestinian conflict, they are subject to a rule called the one RR, the one revert rule. A revert is any time you undo an edit in part or in whole. You can only do one of those in 24 hours. When it comes to some of these more contentious articles, but of course, but really, like it's really more than 24 hours. Like if you do a revert like after 25 hours, that could be considered gaming, and so you want to wait like at least 30 hours, if not longer. So I mean, there is that rule that where like if someone reverts you can always just put it back in, if you haven't used your revert yet for that article. But if the numbers are against you, as they are for Israeli-Palestinian conflict articles, then there's nothing you can really do outside of make your case on the talk page, but you can do the best you can trying to argue that your edit accurately reflects what the source says, or what the sources say, and that it's kosher in the Wikipedia policy. But if you're outnumbered,
right,
there's nothing you really can do.
The thing that's interesting to me about these talk pages and the fact that people can actually see the discussion if they wanted to go to that depth, it reminds me of like when a lawyer says something that they know is going to be stricken from the record, but that the jury cannot unhear it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so to an extent, I guess that if anybody really, really cared about making their own decisions about what is true, what is false, what is biased, that they could go to the talk page and look at the discussion.
But what can make it difficult for the average person is that, as I said, these discussions usually revolve around Wikipedia policy. And so what happens is that when they reference Wikipedia policy, they'll just throw out like, the policies in like shorthand. Like WP, like undo or WPOR or whatever. And it's like, if you're just, if you don't know like what those policies are or what the shorthand is for those policies, you're kind of like, huh, what is this? And of course there are links to them, but like even reading some of the Wikipedia policy pages, like it can still be confusing. And so that's why a lot of my knowledge of Wikipedia, I don't edit Wikipedia. But I have a lot of Wikipedia editor sources, and over the years I asked them, okay, what does this policy mean? Are the editors applying it properly here? And they'll explain and be like, no, it's not being applied properly here. This is how it's supposed to be used. And so think of my articles as like I'm sort of deconstructing the arguments they're making. Like what policies they're citing, what it means, and then explain why these policies are being bastardized to spread a narrative, to spread propaganda. So that's how I approach my articles, and that's why I'm so grateful to have so many Wikipedia editor sources who are willing to talk to me. Because
how do you find Wikipedia editors? Are they people who happen to be editors, or especially because so many are anonymous, do they have a contact page? How do you track them down?
So, I mean, I won't say I don't want to say anything about how I got my sources, but what I will say, I'll say as a general rule, if you want to reach out to an editor, if you want to do so publicly, every editor has their own talk page, and editors will communicate to each other on talk pages. But of course, it's all public, so you make of that what you will. If you make, but you have to make an account to do that. And you make an account. Some editors will have a button on their user page where it says email this editor, and so you can send email to them, and they can reply back or they won't,
Okay.
So that's how you can reach out to editors. I get through their talk page or shoot them an email, but you need an account.
Okay.
You can't. It's not like finding a university professor's email on their on their university website or whatever. It's you have to sort of to really be able to understand Wikipedia and to be able to cover it. You have to sort of really dig down deep and and get your hands dirty. For lack of a better word. And sort of become immersed in the world, even you're not really a part of it. Because, like I said, I don't edit, but I've become so immersed in Wikipedia culture now that I feel like I'm a Wikipedian, even though I'm not.
You are in your own right.
Oh,
so
thank you.
I want to read another quote. Actually, this one I found particularly interesting because it came from the Simon Wiesenthal Center. They warned in their 2025 Digital Terror and Hate Report card that, and this is a quote, Wikipedia has become a breeding ground for anti-Israel bias where truth is distorted, hate is amplified, and Jewish voices are censored.
Or censored,
That's a pretty rough accusation.
It's also not wrong.
It's also not wrong. I want to talk about, so you had a big article in May 2024 about called
that was my first ever cover story on Wikipedia. That was years of research finally coming into, finally bearing fruit. I'm so proud of that article. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, so the article is called 7 Tactics Wikipedia Editors Use to Spread Anti-Israel Bias Since October 7th. That's a mouthful. And this was, prominent in this was your analysis of what was called the Israel-Hamas war page.
Which is now called the Gaza war page, by the way. At the time of my article, it was called Israel-Hamas war. Now it's called Gaza war.
Yeah.
So make of that what you will.
Exactly.
And also, I think now, just about everyone now calls it the Gaza war. I mean, I don't think Gaza war became such common parlance until it became a title at Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
So I don't have proof of this, but it seems like that's an example of how quickly something spreads from Wikipedia into the public lexicon. And same with Gaza genocide too.
Of course.
I don't recall hearing that term as much as I have since that became the title of the Wikipedia page.
And there's probably a chicken and an egg at work here. But I do want to say, because again, you're speaking to somebody who's on the same page as you, the same wiki page. But a lot of people don't really understand I just want to elucidate for people a little bit. Why is it problematic that a page that used to be called the Israel-Hamas war is now called the Gaza war? Guys, what this is an intentional ploy to cut Hamas out of the discussion and to intimate that Israel's war is on the people of Gaza rather than the Hamas terrorists who rule them. And other linked pages that refer to this include the Gaza-Israel conflict. Again, no Hamas in that, and quote unquote Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Again, who are the Israelis against? Oh, it's the Palestinians. Wrong. It's Israel against terrorists, and this is whole narrative that this is the genocide narrative that Israel is against the citizenry rather than the deeply, deeply ensconced terrorist element within them. I'm wondering, Aaron, not Andrew, Why do you think Wikipedia consistently chooses labels that seem to obscure Hamas's role in the conflict?
I mean, it reflects the politics of the editors. I mean, if you look at the Hamas page, for instance, I mean, like that really does its best to try and whitewash Hamas, and I mean, it, you know, as I said, like there's been a core of 5 to 10 editors for years, for a decade plus, who tried to demonize Israel on Wikipedia and try and whitewash the Palestinians, whitewash Palestinian terrorism, including Hamas. You know, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm not." They'll say, "I don't support Hamas, but I just support like human rights for everyone." You know, and yet it always goes in. Yet they always seem to like whitewash Hamas. And so so like one example is if you look at the Hamas Wikipedia page, there is like 2 sentences that compares the Hamas charter to the Likud party platform. And then they'll say, like, oh, well, that's like, yes, Hamas calls the Hamas 1988 charter calls for the destruction of Israel, but like the Likud party platform calls for all the land to be part of Israel. That's double standard, and it's just like, which of course that's an absurd comparison, because the Hamas charter calls for the destruction of Israel, and death to all Jews. The Israeli part of the Likud party platform. I mean, yeah, it says that, you know, that all of like Gaza and Judea and Samaria shall all be under Israel, but like, I mean, firstly, it doesn't call for the Likud party platform does not call for the annihilation of Arabs, for one thing. But also, like, it's the Likud party platform. It's a political party platform. That's no different than the Republican Party platform or the Democrat Party platform, where like it's words, but like not every politician adheres to it. But Hamas views their charter as sacrosanct. You know, like it's a religious document that they must adhere to word for word. And of course, you know, on Wikipedia, they will say the 1988 charter was bad, but the 2017 revised charter, you know, they made it clear that their issue was with Zionists, not Jews. But which again, that is not true. Like the 2017 appended document, not a new charter, an appended document, uses Zionists and Jews interchangeably. I mean, I'm digressing a bit, but anyway, you can see how with that sentence, where they're comparing the Hamas charter to the Likud party platform, like that's whitewashing Hamas. And there were, again, like these, you know, there were at least a handful of these 5 to 10 editors that I'm talking about who pushed hard to have that comparison in there, you know, back in like 2016. And that's how it works on Wikipedia, is that they find ways like that to try and whitewash Hamas and demonize Israel, you know, because they'll try to both sides like that, but in that case, it's not a both sides thing. Like there's a clear right and wrong, which is that Israel self-defense, Hamas terrorism. There is no comparing the two. Whatever you may think of Netanyahu or Likud, like there is no, like it's just it is a ludicrous, absurd comparison to compare the Likud party platform to the Hamas charter. But that's what the Wikipedia page of the Hamas does. And so that right there is a snapshot of the politics of Wikipedia editors on this subject.
But I understand their desire to whitewash the population, which, ask any of the hostages, the population was just as involved in their abduction, in their in housing them, in beating them, in abusing them, in nobody standing up to try to help them as Hamas themselves. But I understand if you have an agenda to try to make the population look like, oh, these are all just innocent people. But why go so far as to whitewash terror?
Again, it just reflects the politics of the editors on Wikipedia.
Are they terrorists? Are they terrorist sympathizers? I mean, do they? I mean,
it's interesting. Like you'll see some editors. Well, I know that there's one editor who has said that. Trying to think exactly how this editor phrased it, where when it comes to Hezbollah, it was like, oh, like my, you know. This editor said that their father was fought in like resistance against the homeland, You know, I can, and then the editor was saying that Hezbollah was coming from the same perspective, although they're like, I'm not pro Hezbollah. You know, I'm just saying I understand their, you know, their perspective or whatever. And so, or they'll say like, well, Hamas is bad, but so is the IDF. And so there's a lot of that sort of both sides thing going on. And so does that make them terrorist sympathizers? I mean, you know, I'll leave that to, you know, to the reader and the viewer. But again, it's the politics. It goes to show how diluted these editors are. You know, it just shows how much of a hate they have on for Israel, and how it shows in these articles.
Yeah, I also want to point out something else that you wrote about in your 7 Tactics article. You pointed out this sentence, and I'm going to quote the sentence: numerous commentators have identified the broader context of Israeli occupation as a cause of war. You said that this was evidence of bias because it cites, quote unquote, numerous commentators, which were actually a few commentators, all of whom, as it turns out, were anti-Israel. But what stuck out for me actually was not the numerous commentators bit. It was the passing reference to Israeli occupation, which is repeated throughout every single Israel-related article, again, to reinforce this subversive anti-Israel narrative. In fact, we see these false and like heavily loaded terms like occupation, like genocide, as you said, and they just slip them into the Israel content. What impact does this have on people's broader understanding of the actual conflict? Because again, the average reader doesn't even understand that these words are words of propaganda. They are not just explaining a fact.
Exactly. And so, and I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier about how Gaza worries down the public lexicon as is Gaza genocide, is that it reverberates. And that means people start using the word occupation more, even though like what's going on in Gaza is absolutely not an occupation. I mean, the whole like de facto occupation or whatever. I mean, it's such a ridiculous argument. But on Wikipedia, like again, your personal opinions don't matter in Wikipedia discussions. It's all about, you have to argue what the sources say and what Wikipedia policy says. And so what these editors will say is that there's academic consensus in favor of the idea that Israel's occupying Gaza, and they'll cite the UN too, you know, as evidence of that. And you know, and unfortunately, a lot of academics are, as we know, are biased against Israel, and so it's not it's you know, it's easy if you're not the Israel editor on Wikipedia to find academics who agree with your point of view and be able to put, and to say in a neutral voice, Israel's occupying Gaza or Israel's occupying the West Bank. I mean, there's occupation in the West Bank. That's a Wikipedia article that's been around for several years now.
Right.
So, and going back to the numerous commentators, the reason why I focused on that, I mean, yes, there was a bunch of anti-Israel propagandists that they put under the umbrella of numerous commentators. So that was like John Mearsheimer, Rashida Tlaib. I mean, you know, but the reason why I focused on that is because the Wikipedian term for referring to numerous commentators is called weasel words. Because it's so like that's usually used when it's like kind of like vague words like, oh, some commentators say this or so forth. Like you're supposed to say who they are. Because if you say numerous commentators, it comes across like these are authoritative figures with so much scholarly expertise. They're so neutral, which of course, like, you know, Rashida Tlaib is not. You know, John Mearsheimer, he's a scholar, but like he's been very anti-Israel for years, and so, you know, that's why how it's supposed to work on Wikipedia is you're supposed to say, you know, Rashida Tlaib and John Mearsheimer or whomever, you know, believe that the cause of the war is, is what occupying Gaza, like, as in like it's their opinion. That because like Wikipedia is supposed to take sides, don't engage in them. That's what neutral point of view says.
Right.
So it's anyway. I mean, that's why I focused on the numerous commentators part in that article.
Yeah, because they put out these words without any qualifications. And it's also interesting that on the Hamas page, the very first paragraph states that they govern the quote unquote Israeli occupied Gaza Strip. Now this is ridiculous because Israel unilaterally withdrew, of course, for those of you who don't know, not just the alive people, but the dead people. There are no Jews in Gaza since 2005. And yet Hamas took control of Gaza in 2007. So to claim on any level that Hamas is there because on Israeli occupied land is as far from the truth as it possibly can get. And there's just, what's crazy and infuriating is that there's no way to correct this record, even though, I mean, this is such fact-based evidence. It's so easy to verify. But okay, what if I said that the source was New York Times? Certainly the New York, I mean, everyone was reporting on this when it happened, when Israel literally was pulling Jews out of, like, with their hands. The IDF were removing they call them settlers from the Strip and digging up graves. And so all these green light sources were reporting on this. And yet those facts are still not allowed or still don't get through.
So here's an interesting thing about how Wikipedia operates is that, like, when a current event happens in real time, it's kind of a madhouse because there's so many people editing current event articles in real time as they're happening. Just things change so quickly, not just in the news, but also means that editors are constantly trying to change, Wikipedia articles on things happening in real time. And so, but as time goes on, an article, a current event that may be based on, like, media sources, will over time, there will be academic literature about the topic. And then the Wikipedia article will go from being primarily based on media sources to being based on academic sources. And so when it comes to Israel withdrawing from Gaza, I mean, that was now like over 20 years ago. And so there's now been a lot of academic literature on the subject. And as I said, we all know that there are a lot of biased academics against Israel. And so if you're a Wikipedia editor, it's not hard to find, academic literature that says Israel occupies Gaza. And so they just cite that. And on Wikipedia, academics take precedent over like media sources. Wikipedia is very deferential to academics.
Okay. Let's talk about an academic. You know Shana Moore?
Yeah.
Okay.
He is quoted on my articles.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's supposed to be on the show, but hasn't happened yet.
One of these days.
Yeah. So he told JNS that Wikipedia sourcing.
He told me for the article I believe that you're referring to.
Oh, okay. So I'm just going to read another quote because these quotes and it just to see how widespread the acknowledgement of this bias.
Right. I mean, but his quote to me was pretty good though. A downstream effect of the capture of academia by anti-Israel forces. It's so true.
Okay. So the broader quote was that it represents a downstream effect of the capture of academia by anti-Israel forces, something that was already more or less complete by the early 1980s. So this is interesting to me as somebody who is a child of the 70s and 80s and went to, high school and college in the 80s and 90s. Do we know if this anti-Israel bias, if it had already captured academia, was present at all in Encyclopedia Brittanica or other traditional?
That's a good question. I haven't taken time to look at it closely. I'm sure that there. I mean,
I'm talking about like 1980s, 1990s.
Good question.
2000s.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's worth exploring.
Okay, topic for your next.
For next JNS article.
No, I am very interested in that because we tend to, because of our obsession into independence, on the internet, to assume that internet rules have completely changed the way that discourse is presented. But to some extent, some of it is literally what we had before, just now in electronic format. So I'm very interested to find that out. Oh, somebody just asked a question.
Yeah.
Is there a similar bias in the other language pages?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So to understand, Wikipedia has more than 320 different language pages, and they all have their own different set of like rules and policies. And of course, there's some overlap, but also like different content. Like an article on Hamas, the English Wikipedia is not going to be the same as what's on the French Wikipedia or on the Arabic Wikipedia. I haven't looked at the most of my research.
Do you know Arabic?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. But from what I understand, the Arabic Wikipedia is even worse than the English one.
Sure.
Yeah. But also, like, I've done a little bit of research on the French Wikipedia, just a little bit, because last year there was a story that came out in a French publication where this French journalist, she had a book. Her name is like Nora Bossini. I probably mispronouncing it. I apologize, Nora. But she had a book come out recently where she infiltrated a bunch of anti-Israel movements in France. And one of the things that she infiltrated was a training session on how to edit the French Wikipedia put on by an anti-Israel activist. And she wrote an article about that. I got notified of it, so I interviewed her, and I realized that at the time I was working on a big story about Tech for Palestine, which is it's a Discord server that had a channel dedicated to a Wikipedia, and the editors on there were openly coordinating to make a bunch of anti-Israel edits onto various pages. Like that's very much against Wikipedia policy. You cannot coordinate like that behind closed doors trying to implement a narrative. And so while I was not the first to break it, but I did have a big story about like the aftermath and how it was handled on Wikipedia. But anyway, there was an overlap between what she had infiltrated and what I was looking into Tech for Palestine. And so I incorporated that into my story, and we kind of helped blow the thing open. But from what I can tell, the French Wikipedia, it's also like not good on Israel. Like if you look at like there's a page on like the red triangle that's associated with Hamas. I mean, it's worse than what the English Wikipedia page says about it, for instance. And if you read her work on the French Wikipedia, it's clear that it's very biased against Israel too. I mean, I don't know about in the other languages, but my sense is that the French Wikipedia might be worse than the English one. I'm
most concerned about the Arabic. So it sounds like there's no cross-referencing between the various language platforms. No. And that in and of itself is problematic. They should have one standard that happens to be translated, because by having different content in different languages, you're automatically by default once again introducing bias. If you want something neutral, you need to have a standard and then translate it as a neutral standard from one to the other. So the fact that, I was doing, I broke this story today about this very strange confluence, whatever, that I found in my research. But it turns out that the Levant, the Wikipedias of the Levant depend on Jordanian and Palestinian academia. Now, for those of you who know anything about Palestinian academia, which starts with UNRWA, most of it is based on the platform of kill Jews. And so if that is the basis of their like academic platform, well, this is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I've really done any research on the Wikipedia of the Levant or whatever, but I'll just say that from what I understand about the Arabic Wikipedia is that apparently anything goes on there, and so, I mean, like I haven't looked at it closely, but I know that Ohad Merlin over the Jerusalem Post has done some good work on that. So I would recommend reading his stuff for the Arabic Wikipedia. I know the ADL, they had a report on Wikipedia came out last year, and they had a little bit on the Arabic Wikipedia that talked about it too. I mean, I focus on the English Wikipedia one because that's the most widely read, of course. But yeah, there should be more research done on the other language Wikipedias. That's gonna be something I should tackle down the road.
Yeah, you've got a lot to tackle down the
Yeah.
road.
Oh, for sure. Wikipedia. You know, as David Suiza, told me a number of times, Wikipedia is the gift that keeps on giving from a news perspective.
So let me ask you a question about Grokpedia, because what's interesting to me about it is that, first of all, it's done in real time, right? So wherein theoretically a Wikipedia article could take hours, days, weeks,
Yeah.
or honestly never be updated because a human being has to make that edit. With the new Grokpedia, it's all AI based with no human interaction, no interlocutors, no editors. It is all based on crawling the entire web, including, of course, Wikipedia.
Right. That's yeah.
But is this AI-based model with no chance of human bias being added in, because it does aim to sort of extract the facts based on cross-referencing? I don't know how effective it is. But the fact that there's no human element, is this a good thing or a bad thing, in your opinion?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's going either way. I mean, because we know how, we know from Wikipedia how a crowdsourced model can become vulnerable to people with nefarious agendas. With AI, I mean, AI is so new. It's, I mean, if you look at like ChatGPT and so forth, like I mean, Wikipedia feeds on ChatGPT, so ChatGPT is not free from bias. So, and of course, we also saw Grok kind of turn full Hitler
Yes.
over the summer, which was insane.
Do you want to explain what happened? Because not everybody knows about
right.
this.
So over the summer, Grok, because Grok, that's the AI tool on X, started spewing like full on like anti-Semitic Nazi rhetoric, in its answers, and it became like a big thing. And Elon was like, "Oh, this is bad. We're gonna fix it," and he did so. And now it seems like Grok has gotten better, hopefully. And so, but it was scary to see Grok like turn into that, because it's like, well, that came from somewhere, and it kind of I think I was speaking to an AI expert recently who was saying that like the internet tends to lean anti-Semitic, and that's
Sure.
and that's the AI. I mean, AI platforms, they get their information from the internet, so so like what an encyclopedia based off an AI that's based off the internet, like, would that be any better than human? I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say because of how new AI is.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone really knows like what the future is with AI. I mean, if it's going to become like Skynet, or if it's going to become like an actually useful tool that can make humanity better. I don't know. I mean, I think that it's an interesting idea, and I think that if there's anyone who could sort of like compete with the Google Wikipedia monopoly, like it would be someone like Elon Musk. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Well, the challenge and the reason why Grok went full Nazi, and the challenge with Grok and Grokpedia, is that it's not just indexing the entire web, but it's including the entire X. Now, the X has been overrun with anti-Semitic bots and propaganda.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
So I don't know if they have any like bona fide methodology for discerning fact from fiction.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
When I say they, I mean AI.
I mean AI, yeah. I mean, it's interesting, like, the ADL has had some studies recently on... there was a study that the ADL supported where these researchers, they made a chatbot through Claude, which is one of the AI platforms that was successful in being able to talk people out of their anti-Semitic beliefs. And it was durable, you know?
Wait, was that deliberate? Or that was just how the AI
No, it was
happened
deliberate.
Okay.
It was deliberate. And, you know, I would say that's promising in terms of helping, you know, fight anti-Semitism and so forth. But I mean, it's, you know, I mean, AI kind of is what the programmers make it to be, you know? So if you have an AI that is trained to fight anti-Semitism and it's trained to be, if an AI bot is trained for anti-Semitism, it probably will do a good job on it based on this study. Can you trust an AI bot to, you know, take the entire internet and distill it in a neutral, factual manner? That's, I don't know. I mean, it remains to be seen. So, and with AI, again, AI is just so new. It's hard to really predict just because it's, you know, we're in unexplored territory here.
And the people who program it have to want to
program
it to be anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit more about regulation before we wind down the conversation. Yeah. There's so much I actually had to quote because it just gets so confounding. But when I tried to research like the congressional efforts to regulate Wikipedia, Google ironically fed me a Wikipedia article about it.
Sounds about right.
But here's what the interparagraph had to say, and I quote, Wikipedia, hosted by nonprofit organization, the Wikimedia Foundation Incorporated, has been involved with various conflicts with the federal government of the United States. Conflicts have included conflict of interest editing by the FBI and CIA, legal threats from the FBI, allegations of NSA mass surveillance of Wikipedia editors, and proposed laws affecting Wikipedia that have been met with significant backlash, unquote. So there's no bias against the big bad USA in that quote. I mean, it's just so funny that basically this whole paragraph is saying, oh, it's all illegitimate BS by our horrible American government. So just so people understand, Wikipedia is anti-Israel. It is anti-Zionist. It is anti-Semitic in a lot of respects. Is it also anti-American? Is it also anti-Western? What would you say?
I would say it's anti-Western. So there are a couple of things at play here. The first thing is to understand like the editing base of Wikipedia. From what I have heard from sources, the majority of editors on Wikipedia are European. Americans are a relative minority. And a lot of editors on Wikipedia are Marxists, like, you know, like a lot of old weird internet dudes, you know, who are Marxist anarchist types. And I mean, they're also like some like Gen Z tech dudes and so forth. But when you realize that a lot of these people are European, or I guess if you combine them two, it's European Marxists, you know. And there are people on Wikipedia where they will openly state that they are Marxists, you know, that they're anarchists, you know, that they support the right of return from Palestinians. And so forth and so on. And, you know, that's sort of the normal Wikipedia, you know, is people with those points of view. And so, you know, when Wikipedia is dominated by Europeans who are Marxists, you know, then you start to understand why it reads the way that it does.
Yeah.
And I think also when talk about like there's that quote there, I mean, like really the core of it is Wikipedia editors being concerned about their privacy, their anonymity. Wikipedia editors in general are like very skittish about about being, you know, unmasked and whatever. And Wikipedia goes as far as to encourage its editors to be anonymous, and they will say like, don't leave a paper trail in your edit, so no one can find out who you are. And look, on the one hand, like I mean, I've heard that a lot of editors deal with, you know, a bunch of, you know, harassment and like doxing or threats of doxing and that kind of thing, which is terrible. At the same time, as we've discussed, Wikipedia is the world's go-to site for information. And so basically you have editors, shrouded by anonymity, sort of like dictating what information should be the dominant source of information out there in the world. But like these anonymous editors are determining what will reverberate in our broader body politic, and there's no one to hold them accountable. That's problematic. And I think that it's a conversation that the Wikipedians should have amongst themselves. I don't expect anything to change in that regard. I mean, X, not so long ago, had this new policy where they were going to show like where every account is based, which was great because you saw some of these like anti-Israel accounts being based in like Saudi Arabia, for instance, and so forth. I don't think that ever happened on Wikipedia because of how much these editors, want to keep their anonymity, and so.
To me, the very fact that they feel like they have to protect their anonymity is already incriminating evidence that they are not dealing in facts.
Yeah. I mean, there's a case to be made there for that, for sure.
Yeah. So do you personally have any ideas or thoughts on how, if you were the wiki god, how would you regulate Wikipedia? And also we have to keep in mind the big catchphrase of the day, which is free speech. So how do we balance these things when we're dealing with things like libel, we're dealing with slander, we're dealing with defamation, we're dealing with things that are literally ruining people's lives.
Yeah.
And yet, you have people on both sides saying, yeah, but it's free speech. We do have a First Amendment. How do we balance this out? And how would you change the wiki world if you were in charge?
Oh man, that's a great question. I'm just trying to think of like, you talked a lot of a lot of my wiki editor sources don't believe that Wikipedia can be saved or that there can be any reforms that can fix it. Some of it is just as being, I think a lot of the editors I talk to would just say like, well, the worst offenders need to be banned. There needs to be a more balance in terms of, the ideological alignment of editors, which means more people need to edit. And I think that because Wikipedia is such a bureaucratic quagmire, and because it's so easy to get banned from Wikipedia, it's not a really great environment for new editors, like people who actually want to take the time to edit and be a good neutral editor. It's not conducive for that. It just isn't. And I think, obviously you need rules, but I think all this confusing layers of bureaucracy, I think hurts Wikipedia more than it helps it. So I would maybe try and streamline that a bit. And I think having admins who can just sanction people. It's I don't know. I think there needs to be some checks on that. I don't know what those checks would be exactly, but I basically think what I would do is like it just needs to be an easier environment for new editors to join. And so. And I think also like I don't think anything can change until like the sources change, until like the reliable sources becomes like more ideologically even.
Yeah.
It's not going to change, and I think that's the first step to making Wikipedia more neutral. But of course, that's an uphill battle because you need like 2/3 of the community to undo some of these ratings on like Fox and the ADL and so forth, and that support is not there right now. So it really just comes down to like, getting more people who want to edit neutrally, like truly neutrally, to change Wikipedia. And I think that can only be done by making Wikipedia a more user-friendly place.
Okay. I think the problems are in what I think your verbiage of a bureaucratic quagmire is perfect.
It is, yeah.
And then if we go back, rewind approximately 2 hours when you said this is a numbers game, these are the two things that I fear will make the ideological entrenchment impossible to overcome. Sanger wrote this 9 treatises, right?
9 theses,
Nine theses, Yeah. And they're within them are such like self-contradictory concepts. Like, for example, he wants to have a constitutional convention. Well, that's fine, but coming back to the bureaucratic quagmire and the numbers game, all it's going to do is put the same people in a room and they're going to come to the same conclusions. So again, like, we have an AI loop, but then we also have an ideological loop. And I do hope that there's a day when people wake up and do want to give Israel and the Jews a fair shake. But history sort of dictates otherwise.
Right. I also just want to add that on Justipedia, which is one of those Wikipedia alternative sites, my understanding is that how they resolve conflicts there is that instead of like, editors, instead of like, having like a closer and discussion and so forth, like they'll have a board of experts kind of weighing in, like an evenly split board of experts that will say like whether or not something is truly neutral or not. And I think having that, like maybe actually like having some actual experts weighing in some of these things, would go a long way. I'm not to say that Wikipedia doesn't take feedback from experts, but like at the end of the day, the numbers matter. And so I think that something like that would go a long way toward making Wikipedia better.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think that a better Wikipedia will create a better world for Jews and for Israel. And quite honestly, a better world for Jews and Israel is a better world for the world, because a world that is consumed by hate is a world that is not serving anybody. So to wrap up, I just want to finish with the question that I ask everybody, which is, what do the words Am Yisrael Chai mean to you?
The people of Israel live. Of course, that's the literal meaning. I would say that it's a source of pride, not just in Israel, but in our Jewish identity, our heritage. It's I mean it's a show of pride. It's like a rallying cry in favor of our people. I always find it very heartening to hear people say that, because it's like, we have to be loud and proud in face of all this hate. Like that is how you beat hate is with light. Be a light. Be a light in the darkness, and only by being loud and proud of being Jewish, of support for Israel, and showing to the world all the good that Israel has done for the world, all the good that Jews have done for the world. Like that's how we win. And I think Am Yisrael Chai embodies that, especially if you're shouting that, like it's chanting like in a park, or even just like you're at a dance party, and you're just like shouting Am Yisrael Chai to like some Israeli beat music or whatever.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's fun, but as I say, it really warms my heart.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me
I
on.
learned so much. I'm sure that everybody learned so much.
Yeah.
Where can people find you, follow you, if they want to learn more?
You can give me a follow at Bandler's Banter on X and Instagram. I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn. As Shana said at the beginning, I'm a full-time national news reporter at JNS. I write every day. You can see my byline there. There's been plenty on Wikipedia. There's also been plenty on other subjects too, like the campuses and so forth. Check out my work and check out the work of JNS more broadly. As a site, I think we're doing a lot of great things. So yeah, follow JNS basically.
Yeah, absolutely. All the links are in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on.
And as they say in the old country, Am Yisrael Chai.
Am Yisrael Chai.
Am Yisrael Chai.